3 witnesses saw a man leave Marilyn Monroe's house at 4 in the morning on August 5th. The FBI opened a file on him immediately. They sealed it for 60 years. When researchers finally got access in 2022, 22 pages were missing, not redacted, not classified, gone. Someone reached into that file decades after Marilyn's death and made sure you would never know what those pages said. This is the story of the visitor who was erased from history, and the evidence that proves he was there when Marilyn Monroe took her last breath. August 4th, 1962. Marilyn Monroe spends the day at her Brentwood home on 5th Helena Drive. It's a Sunday. The house is small by Hollywood standards, a modest hacienda-style property she bought just months earlier. She calls it her first real home. The walls are white stucco. The bedroom windows face the street. There's a guest cottage in the back where her housekeeper Eunice Murray sleeps. The property is secluded enough for privacy, but visible enough that neighbors notice cars coming and going. On this particular Sunday, several cars come and go. Her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, arrives in the afternoon around 4:30 p.m. He stays for 2 hours. Neighbors see his Cadillac parked in the driveway. By 7 p.m., Marilyn is making phone calls, lots of them. Her phone records show outgoing calls to New York, to Washington, D.C., to her attorney's office, to her former husband Joe DiMaggio. These aren't social calls. Marilyn is agitated. Multiple people who speak to her that night will later describe her as frantic, upset, anxious, slurring her words. One friend, actor Peter Lawford, calls her at 8 p.m. She sounds distant, detached. She tells him, "Say goodbye to Pat, say goodbye to the president, and say goodbye to yourself because you've been a good guy." Lawford is alarmed. He calls her back multiple times. No answer. He considers driving to her house but doesn't. By midnight, the calls stop. The house goes dark. What happens next depends entirely on who you ask, because every single person involved in the events of that night has told a different version of the story, and those contradictions aren't accidents. They're carefully constructed lies designed to hide one simple fact: Marilyn Monroe was not alone when she died. Let's start with the official timeline. According to the Los Angeles Police Department report filed on August 5th, Eunice Murray checks on Marilyn at around 3 in the morning. She notices a light under the bedroom door. The cord to Marilyn's bedroom phone is visible beneath the door. She knocks, no answer. She tries the door, locked from the inside. Murray becomes concerned. She walks around to the outside of the house and peers through the window. The curtains are partially open. She sees Marilyn lying on the bed, motionless, the phone in her hand. Murray immediately calls Dr. Greenson. He arrives at 3:40 a.m. He breaks the window to get inside, shattering the glass with a fireplace poker. He examines Marilyn. She's dead. Her body is still warm. Rigor mortis hasn't set in. He calls Dr. Hyman Engelberg, Marilyn's personal physician. Engelberg arrives around 4 a.m. Together, the two doctors examine the scene. They confer privately. They decide to wait before calling the police. Why? They never fully explain. They finally call the police at 4:25 in the morning, 45 minutes after Greenson arrived, nearly 90 minutes after Murray says she first noticed something was wrong. The police arrive at 4:35. Sergeant Jack Clemens is the first officer on scene. He finds Marilyn lying face down on her bed, naked, one hand clutching the telephone. The room is immaculate. No glass of water, no pill bottles on the nightstand. The bed is perfectly made, as if she had been placed on top of the covers rather than sleeping beneath them. Clemens is immediately suspicious. He photographs the scene. He notes the absence of evidence consistent with suicide. Later, he will testify that Dr. Greenson seemed nervous, evasive. The official cause of death: acute barbiturate poisoning, probable suicide. Case closed within 72 hours, except nothing about this story makes sense. Start with Eunice Murray. In her first police interview on August 5th, she says she checked on Marilyn at midnight and everything was fine. In a second interview 3 days later, she changes it to 3 a.m. In a 1985 BBC documentary, she admits she can't remember what time it was. She contradicts herself within the same interview, first saying 2:30, then 3:15, then sometime after midnight. In a 1992 interview conducted by a French journalist, she says she saw a light under the door around 2:30, but didn't check on Marilyn until later. 4 different times, 4 different stories. When asked directly if she's hiding something, Murray pauses for almost 15 seconds on camera. Her eyes shift to the left, her hands clasped together, and then she says, "Why would I hide anything?" It's not an answer, it's a deflection. The interviewer presses her, "Because someone told you to." Murray's face tightens. "I was advised to cooperate with the authorities," she says, "and that's what I did." The choice of words is telling. Advised by whom? To cooperate with which authorities? Murray never clarifies, and it gets worse. Dr. Greenson's timeline doesn't match Murray's. He tells police he arrived at 3:40, but the police dispatch log shows a call from Marilyn's address logged at 3:35, 5 minutes before Greenson says he even got there. Someone called from inside that house before the doctor arrived. Greenson never explains who made that call or why it's not in his statement. When Sergeant Clemens asks him directly, Greenson says he doesn't know anything about an earlier call. But the dispatch log doesn't lie. The call came from Marilyn's phone at exactly 3:35 a.m. The operator who took the call notes that the caller, a woman, said, "Something's happened at Miss Monroe's residence," and then hung up before providing details. That caller was Unia Murray. But if Murray called at 3:35, why does she say she didn't call Dr. Greenson until closer to 4? The answer is simple. She's covering for someone else who was already there. Dr. Engelberg's timeline is even stranger. He says he arrived at 4 a.m., 20 minutes after Greenson called him, but a neighbor, Abe Landau, later testifies under oath that he saw Engelberg's car, a distinctive white Lincoln Continental, parked outside Marilyn's house at 2:15 in the morning. Landau is certain of the time, because he checked his watch when his dog started barking. Landau is 73 years old, a retired aerospace engineer. He has no reason to lie. He's not seeking publicity. He simply reports what he saw, and what he saw places Dr. Engelberg at Marilyn's house nearly 2 hours before he claims he received the call. When confronted with Landau's testimony years later, Engelberg refuses to comment. His attorney issues a statement saying Landau is mistaken, but Landau never wavers. He saw the car, he noted the time, and he's certain. These aren't small discrepancies. These are foundational contradictions that collapse the entire official narrative. If Engelberg was there at 2:15, why did he lie about arriving at 4? If someone called the police at 3:35, why does the report say the first call came at 4:25? If Murray checked on Marilyn at midnight, 2:30, or 3 a.m., why can't she pick one answer and stick with it? The reason is simple. All three of them are protecting someone, and that someone was inside the house between 2 and 4 in the morning when Marilyn Monroe was dying. Now let's talk about the man 3 witnesses saw leaving. The first witness is Abe Landau, the neighbor who saw Dr. Engelberg's car. Landau is standing in his driveway at approximately 4 a.m. He's an insomniac, a condition he's dealt with since his retirement. He's outside smoking a cigarette when he watches a dark sedan, not Engelberg's Lincoln, but a different car, a black or dark blue vehicle, pull out of Marilyn's driveway and head west towards Sunset Boulevard. The car is moving fast, no headlights. The driver doesn't slow down at the stop sign at the end of the street. Landau watches the taillights disappear into the darkness. He doesn't think much of it until the next morning, when he hears on the radio that Marilyn Monroe is dead. He immediately calls the police. They take his statement over the phone. An officer arrives at his house later that afternoon. Landau repeats his story. The officer writes it down. That statement never appears in the official LAPD report. It's filed separately and marked supplementary evidence. It remains buried until 1985. The second witness is a woman named Mrs. Elizabeth Pollard, who lives 2 houses down from Marilyn on 5th Helena Drive. She's 71 years old, a widow, lives alone with a terrier named Max. She's awake because Max is barking, something he rarely does. She looks out her window at 3:50 a.m. and sees a man walking quickly from Marilyn's side gate toward a car parked on the street. The car is approximately 30 feet from Marilyn's driveway, parked beneath a eucalyptus tree. Mrs. Pollard has excellent vision. She's not wearing her glasses, but can clearly see the man's silhouette under the streetlight. She describes him as tall, over 6 feet, dark-haired, wearing a dark suit. He's moving with purpose, not running but walking fast, carrying what looks like a briefcase or a small bag. She watches him get into the car, a sedan, dark-colored, and drive away without turning on the headlights until he's halfway down the block. She notes the time on her bedside clock, 3:52 a.m. She thinks it's odd, but doesn't call the police that night. The next morning, when she hears about Marilyn's death, she calls immediately. An officer takes her statement. It's filed, and then it's lost. The statement resurfaces in 1985 during a grand jury review of Marilyn's death. By then Mrs. Pollard is dead. She died in 1979 from complications of pneumonia. Her daughter provides the grand jury with a copy of the original statement. Mrs. Pollard had kept a carbon copy in her personal files. The grand jury reviews it, but takes no action. The case remains closed. The third witness is the most credible and the most dangerous, Fred Otash. Otash is legendary in Hollywood. He's a former LAPD cop turned private investigator. He bugs hotel rooms for studio executives who want dirt on their stars. He photographs politicians in compromising situations. He wiretaps phones for divorce attorneys. He works for everyone who needs to destroy someone else. He's also wiretapped Marilyn Monroe's house multiple times on behalf of different clients. On August 5th, Otash gets a call at 2:30 in the morning. He's at home in the Hollywood Hills. The caller identifies himself as someone Otash knows. He won't reveal the name publicly, but in private conversations with trusted colleagues, he indicates the caller was connected to the Kennedy family. Otash is told to go to Marilyn's house immediately. He refuses at first, it's the middle of the night, and he's been drinking. The caller insists. Otash agrees. He arrives at Marilyn's home around 3:15 a.m. He parks down the street and walks to the house. The front door is unlocked. He walks in. There are already two men inside. One is Dr. Greenson. Otash recognizes him immediately. The other is someone Otash knows but refuses to name on any official record. In a sealed deposition given in 1985, 3 years before his death from a heart attack, Otash describes this man as tall, athletic, dark hair, early 40s. The description matches Robert F. Kennedy exactly. Otash says the man is cleaning up. When the attorney asks what that means, Otash says, removing items, papers, a diary, anything that couldn't be there when the cops showed up. Otash watches as the man moves quickly through the bedroom, opening drawers, checking the closet. Doctor watches as the man moves quickly through the bedroom, opening drawers, checking the closet. Greenson is on the phone in the living room, speaking in a low voice. Otash hears fragments. We can't wait any longer, and they need to know it's handled. Otash's testimony continues. He says the man finishes collecting items and places them in a briefcase. The man then speaks briefly to Dr. Greenson. Otash overhears the man say, "It had to be done. She was going to ruin everything." Greenson doesn't respond. Pollard saw him exit through 35 minutes later. Otash remains at the house for another 20 minutes. He watches as Eunice Murray wakes up in the guest cottage and comes into the main house. She seems unsurprised to see Greenson and Otash there. She doesn't ask questions. She simply starts tidying the bedroom, straightening the bed, removing a glass from the nightstand. When Otash asks her what she's doing, she says, "I was told to make sure everything looks right." By whom? She doesn't answer. 3 witnesses. 3 consistent descriptions. A man leaving Marilyn's house between 3:50 and 4:15 in the morning. Dark hair, tall, wearing a suit, moving fast, carrying items from the scene. The FBI opens a file on him within 72 hours. Why would the FBI open a file on someone connected to what the LAPD is calling a suicide? Because the FBI already knows who he is, and they know he wasn't supposed to be there. The file is designated case number 105, Tucelified under 18. It's classified under internal security. That's not a designation for celebrity deaths or accidental overdoses. Internal security files are reserved for threats to national stability, espionage, organized crime, political assassinations, government corruption. The file is thick, over 200 pages when fully compiled. It contains witness statements from Lando, Pollard and Otash. It contains phone records subpoenaed from General Telephone Company. It contains surveillance photos taken by FBI agents who had been monitoring Marilyn in the weeks before her death. It contains interview transcripts with Peter Lawford, with Joe DiMaggio, with Marilyn's attorney Mickey Rudin, with studio executives at 20th Century Fox. And for 60 years, nobody outside the FBI sees a single page. When the Freedom of Information Act requests start piling up in the 1980s, hundreds of requests from journalists, researchers, historians, and conspiracy theorists, the FBI releases a few heavily redacted documents. Names are blacked out, dates are removed, entire paragraphs are marked classified for national security reasons. The released documents reveal almost nothing. They confirm the FBI was investigating Marilyn's death. They confirm witness statements were collected, but they don't reveal who the witnesses saw or what those witnesses said. Researchers spend decades fighting for full access. They file lawsuits. They appeal denials. They argue that national security concerns are no longer relevant 60 years after the fact. Finally, in 2022, a federal judge orders the FBI to release the full unredacted file. It arrives in physical form, a box containing approximately 180 pages of documents. The researchers open the box. They inventory the pages. The page numbers jump from 47 to 70. 22 pages are missing. Not redacted, not withheld, missing. The pages have been physically removed from the file. Someone took them out before the file was shipped to the National Archives for public release. What was on those 22 pages? The FBI won't say. Officially, they claim the pages were lost during a file consolidation in the 1990s, but that explanation doesn't hold up. Earlier inventories from archival reviews in 1991 and 1998 specifically reference those page numbers and describe their contents as witness identification and testimony regarding individual present at scene. The pages existed as recently as 1998. They were removed sometime between 1998 and 2022. Someone with access to FBI archives, someone with the authority to enter a secure facility, locate a specific file, and remove specific pages, decided those 22 pages could never be made public, and they got away with it. We can make educated guesses about what those pages contained based on the pages immediately before and after the gap. Page 47 ends mid-sentence with a witness, likely Fred Otash, describing the moment he arrived at the residence and observed. Page 70 begins with a reference to evidence removed from the scene under direct orders from. The sentence ends there. The next paragraph discusses the individual's departure from the location at approximately 04 hours. Those 22 missing pages contain the name of the man Otash saw. They contain his physical description. They contain the items he removed from Marilyn's house. They contain information about who gave the orders to clean up the scene. And they likely contain evidence that this man was acting under the protection or direction of someone in the federal government. Someone decided that information was too dangerous to ever be released, even 60 years later, even with everyone involved long dead. Let's go back to the phone records. On the night of August 4th, Marilyn makes at least 7 calls between 7 p.m. and midnight. We know this because General Telephone Company keeps records of all outgoing long-distance calls for billing purposes. The records show calls to New York, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, and one to a private number in San Francisco. 6 of those calls are documented and released to the police. The 7th is not. Why? Because that call was removed from the official record before the police requested the logs. How do we know it existed? Because the phone company's internal billing system, which operates independently of the call logs provided to law enforcement, shows an 8-minute call to a Washington, D.C. number at 11:37 p.m. That call doesn't appear in the police report. It doesn't appear in any FBI documentation released to the public. It only surfaces in 2006 during a civil lawsuit when a researcher subpoenas General Telephone's archived billing records dating back to 1962. The billing record is clear. 11:37 p.m., 8 minutes, Washington, D.C., private exchange. The number Marilyn called belongs to a direct line in the Justice Department, not a general switchboard, not a publicly listed office number, a private, unlisted direct line that connected to a specific office on the 5th floor of the Justice Department building. Whose office? The 22 missing pages would tell us, but we're not allowed to know. Here's what we do know. In 1962, Marilyn Monroe is romantically involved with 2 of the most powerful men in the world. She's been having an affair with President John F. Kennedy since 1961. That affair is well documented now, though it was kept secret at the time. Multiple witnesses confirm it. Secret Service agents, White House staff, Kennedy family friends. Secret Service logs show Marilyn entering the White House through a side entrance on at least 3 occasions in early 1962. Phone records connect them, calls from Marilyn's home to a private White House line. But by the summer of 1962, that affair is over. JFK's advisors, particularly his brother Bobby, the Attorney General, have warned him that Marilyn is becoming a liability. She's emotionally unstable. She's been hospitalized multiple times for psychiatric issues. She drinks heavily. She takes too many pills. And most dangerously, she talks. She tells friends about her relationship with the president. She hints at it in interviews. She keeps detailed notes. So JFK ends it. He cuts her off. No more calls. No more visits. Marilyn is devastated. She's been discarded by the most powerful man in the world, and she doesn't take it well. She threatens to hold a press conference. She threatens to write a book. She threatens to destroy him. That's when Bobby Kennedy steps in, not to clean up his brother's mess, but to contain it. And somewhere along the way, the relationship between Bobby and Marilyn becomes romantic. It's unclear exactly when it starts, but by July 1962, Marilyn is obsessed with Bobby Kennedy. She calls him constantly, at his office, at his home in Virginia, on his private line. She writes him letters. She keeps a diary, a red leather-bound book where she documents their conversations. Multiple people see this diary in the weeks before her death. Her friend John Carmen describes it as a little red book she always carried with her. Another friend, Robert Slatzer, claims Marilyn showed him the diary just days before she died, and that it contained notes about conversations with Bobby regarding classified government matters, Cuba, the Bay of Pigs, plans to assassinate Fidel Castro, FBI investigations into organized crime figures like Sam Giancana. Whether Slatzer's account is accurate is debatable. He's been accused of exaggerating his relationship with Marilyn, but multiple other witnesses confirm the diary's existence. After Marilyn dies, the diary vanishes. It's never recovered. It's never mentioned in the police report. And no one who was in that house the night she died admits to ever seeing it. On August 4th, Marilyn is in a state of emotional collapse. She's been trying to reach Bobby Kennedy for days. He's avoiding her. She's called his office. She's called his home. She's left messages with his secretary. He won't call her back. She's spiraling. Friends who speak to her that afternoon describe her as paranoid, convinced Bobby is going to abandon her the same way his brother did. By evening, she's frantic. She calls Peter Lawford, JFK's brother-in-law, and one of Marilyn's closest friends in the Kennedy circle. She tells him she needs to talk to Bobby immediately. Lawford says he doesn't know where Bobby is. She doesn't believe him. She threatens to call reporters. She threatens to call the FBI. She threatens to expose everything. Lawford tries to calm her down, but she's inconsolable. By 11 p.m., she's made her decision. She's going to call Bobby directly, not at home, not at his office, but on his private Justice Department line. The call lasts 8 minutes. We don't know what was said, but we know what happened next. Within 3 hours, someone is at Marilyn's house, and within 6 hours, Marilyn Monroe is dead. Fred Otash, the private investigator, provides one more detail in his sealed deposition. He says that when he arrived at Marilyn's house at 3:15 a.m., the man he recognized, the man he describes as tall, athletic, dark hair, was on the phone in the living room. Otash positions himself in the hallway where he can hear part of the conversation. The man is speaking in a low but urgent voice. Otash hears him say, "It had to be done. She was going to ruin everything. You understand that, right? There was no other option." There's a pause. The man listens to whoever is on the other end. Then he says, "I took care of it. It's over. No one will know." Another pause. Then, "The book is gone. The records are gone. There's nothing left." When the attorney taking Otash's deposition asks who the man was talking to, Otash refuses to answer directly, but he adds one detail. The person on the other end of that call had the power to make this whole thing disappear, and that's exactly what happened. Let's talk about the autopsy. Dr. Thomas Noguchi performs Marilyn's autopsy on the morning of August 5th, beginning at 10:30 a.m. Noguchi is meticulous. He's one of the best forensic pathologists in the country, precise, thorough, unafraid to challenge official narratives. He examines Marilyn's body carefully. He finds high levels of barbiturates in her blood, specifically nembutal and chloral hydrate, two powerful sedatives. The levels are extraordinarily high, 4.5 mg% of nembutal in the blood, 13 mg% in the liver. To put that in perspective, 1.5 mg% is usually fatal. Marilyn had 3 times the lethal dose in her blood. But here's the problem. Noguchi finds almost no barbiturate residue in her stomach. He finds 8 mg% in the liver, but the stomach is nearly empty. There's no significant pill residue, no partially dissolved capsules, no telltale staining or irritation of the stomach lining. That's medically impossible if she swallowed 40 to 50 pills, the amount it would take to produce the blood levels Noguchi measured. When you ingest a massive quantity of barbiturates, they don't just vanish. They leave traces. They damage the stomach lining. They create a chemical signature that's unmistakable. Noguchi finds none of that. He also finds no water, no juice, no liquid of any kind in her stomach, which means if she did swallow pills, she didn't wash them down with anything. So how did the drugs get into her system? Noguchi's report carefully suggests they were administered another way: injection or suppository. Both methods would bypass the digestive system entirely and explain the high blood levels without stomach residue. Noguchi looks for injection sites. He finds none, but he acknowledges in his report that a skilled person could inject between the toes or under the tongue or in other areas that would be difficult to detect. He examines the rectum for signs of suppository administration. His findings are inconclusive. But what's clear is this: the physical evidence does not support the conclusion that Marilyn swallowed the pills that killed her. Noguchi wants to investigate further. He wants to test the contents of the intestines, which could show whether the drugs pass through the digestive system. He wants to examine tissue samples from the injection sites he suspects. But he never gets the chance. His superior, Dr. Theodore Curfey, the Los Angeles County coroner, shuts down the investigation. Curfey holds a press conference on August 6th, less than 24 hours after Marilyn's death, and announces the cause of death as acute barbiturate poisoning, with the manner of death listed as probable suicide. Probable, not definite. Probable. Noguchi is ordered to finalize his report and close the case. He's told not to conduct further tests. He's told not to speak to the press. Years later, after he's retired and no longer bound by departmental policy, Noguchi goes public. In interviews and in his memoir, he admits he was pressured to finalize the report quickly and accept the suicide conclusion, even though the evidence didn't fully support it. Who pressured him? He never names names, but he makes it clear the pressure came from outside the coroner's office, from law enforcement, from city officials, possibly from federal agencies. He says, "I've performed thousands of autopsies in my career. I've never seen a case closed that fast when so many questions remained unanswered. Someone wanted this ruled a suicide, and they wanted it done immediately." There's another medical anomaly that's never been adequately explained. Marilyn's body shows signs of bruising on her lower back and hips, bruising that Noguchi notes in his report but doesn't analyze in depth. The bruises are roughly 2 inches in diameter, symmetrical, consistent with pressure from hands or restraints. They're fresh, inflicted within hours of death, possibly during the time of death. Bruises like that don't come from falling or stumbling. They come from being held down. When reporters asked Dr. Greenson about the bruises during a brief press conference on August 6th, he dismisses them. "Marilyn was clumsy," he says. "She bruised easily. She probably bumped into furniture." But Eunice Murray tells a different story. In her 1985 BBC interview, Murray is asked directly about the bruises. She hesitates, then says, "I saw them. I asked Dr. Greenson about them the next day. He told me they were nothing. He said, 'Don't mention those to anyone. They're not important.'" The interviewer presses, "Why would bruises on a dead woman not be important?" Murray's face goes blank. She doesn't answer. The interview moves on. "Why would bruises consistent with restraint not be important?" "Because they prove someone else was in that room when Marilyn was dying. Because they suggest she didn't quietly swallow pills and drift off to sleep. Because they indicate a struggle, or at the very least, an attempt to prevent her from moving or calling for help. And because acknowledging those bruises would require explaining who inflicted them. Now let's connect the final pieces. On the night of August 4th, Bobby Kennedy is in San Francisco. That's confirmed by multiple sources. He's attending a dinner party at the home of John Bates, a prominent attorney and Kennedy family friend. The party starts at 7 p.m. Multiple guests see Bobby there. He's relaxed, charming, working the room. He stays until around 11 p.m. Several witnesses confirm he leaves around that time, saying he has an early morning commitment. But here's where the timeline fractures. After Bobby leaves the party, he disappears. There are no records of where he goes. No hotel check-in at any San Francisco hotel. No record of him staying with friends. No flight manifest showing him returning to Washington or Virginia. Nothing. The next confirmed, documented sighting of Bobby Kennedy is at 8 a.m. on August 5th, when he boards a commercial flight from San Francisco International Airport back to Washington, D.C. That's a 9-hour gap with zero documentation. Where was he between 11 p.m. on August 4th and 8 a.m. on August 5th? Some researchers believe he flew to Los Angeles on a private plane. Peter Lawford owned a private airstrip in Santa Monica, a small facility used primarily by wealthy friends for discreet travel. A flight from San Francisco to Santa Monica takes approximately 1 hour. If Bobby left the party at 11 p.m., drove to a private airfield, there are 3 within 20 minutes of Bates's home, and boarded a plane by 11:30, he could have landed in Santa Monica by 12:30 a.m. From there it's a 20-minute drive to Brentwood. He could have been at Marilyn's house by 1 a.m. He could have been there during the critical hours between 1 and 4, when Marilyn was either dying or already dead. He could have supervised the cleanup. He could have removed the diary and any other incriminating documents. He could have given the orders to Dr. Greenson and Eunice Murray about what to say and when to call the police. And then he could have been driven back to Santa Monica, flown back to San Francisco, and checked into an airport hotel by 6 a.m., giving him time to shower, change, and board his scheduled 8 a.m. flight as if nothing had happened. The timeline works perfectly, but there's no proof. Or rather, there was proof. Flight logs, passenger manifests, fuel receipts, witness statements, and it's all on the 22 missing pages. Here's what we know for certain. 3 witnesses saw a man matching Robert F. Kennedy's description leave Marilyn's house around 4 a.m. Fred Otash, a private investigator with decades of experience and no reason to fabricate a story that could destroy his career, testifies under oath that he saw this man inside Marilyn's house at 3:15 a.m. removing evidence and overheard him saying it had to be done, she was going to ruin everything. The FBI opens a file classified as internal security, a designation reserved for threats to government stability, and seals it for 60 years. When the file is finally released, the 22 pages that would identify the man Otash saw are missing. Marilyn's phone records show a call to Bobby Kennedy's private Justice Department line hours before her death, a call that's erased from the official logs provided to police. Marilyn's diary, which multiple witnesses confirm contained detailed notes about her relationship with Bobby Kennedy and classified information he shared with her, vanishes without a trace and is never recovered. The timeline provided by Eunice Murray, Dr. Greenson, and Dr. Engelberg contradicts itself at every turn because all 3 of them are lying to protect someone. The medical evidence shows Marilyn didn't swallow the pills that killed her. The drugs were administered by injection or suppository, methods that require another person. Marilyn's body shows bruises consistent with being physically restrained during or near the time of death. And every single person who was involved in the events of that night, every person who could testify to what really happened, is either silenced, discredited, or dead within a decade. Was Bobby Kennedy the man who left Marilyn's house at 4 a.m.? The circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. Was he there when she died? The timeline, the witness testimony, and the missing evidence all point to yes. Did he kill her? That's the wrong question. The right question is this: did Marilyn Monroe die from an accidental overdose of pills she voluntarily took, or was she sedated against her will or without her knowledge by someone who knew she was about to destroy 2 of the most powerful political careers in American history? And if she was sedated, if those drugs were administered without her consent, does it matter whether the person who did it intended to kill her or merely intended to render her unconscious long enough to remove the evidence and silence her threats? The FBI file exists because the FBI knows exactly what happened that night. They know who was there. They know what was taken. They know why it was taken. They've known for 60 years, and they've spent those 60 years making sure you never find out. The 22 missing pages aren't missing by accident. They're not lost. They're not misfiled. They were deliberately removed by someone with the authority to access classified files and the motivation to protect a legacy that's more valuable than the truth. Those pages contain the name of the man Fred Otash saw. They contain witness statements that directly implicate that man in the events leading to Marilyn's death. They contain evidence of a cover-up orchestrated at the highest levels of the federal government, and they contain proof that the official story, the one we've been told for 60 years, is a lie. Fred Otash dies in 1992 from a sudden heart attack. He's 68 years old, in reasonably good health. Before his death, he tells a reporter from the Los Angeles Times, "I know what happened that night. I know who was there. I know what they did, and I'll never be allowed to tell the full story because the people involved, or their families, are still too powerful. They'll bury me if I try." 3 months later, he's dead. Eunice Murray dies in 1994 at the age of 93. In her final interview, conducted just weeks before her death, she admits for the first time, "We all lied. We had to. We were told if we didn't cooperate, terrible things would happen. To us, to our families. So we said what they told us to say." The interviewer asks who they were. Murray closes her eyes and says, "The people who make sure the powerful stay powerful." Dr. Greenson dies in 1979, taking his secrets with him. He never speaks publicly about Marilyn's death after the initial press conference. Friends say he became paranoid in his final years, convinced he was being watched. Dr. Engelberg dies in 1984, also silent. He refuses every interview request, every book offer, every attempt to get him to clarify the contradictions in his timeline. Peter Lawford, who many believe arranged Bobby Kennedy's secret travel that night, dies in 1984 after years of severe alcoholism and what friends describe as paralyzing guilt. He tells one close friend shortly before his death, "I know too much. That's why they'll never let me write my memoir. They've made that very clear." Marilyn Monroe died on August 5, 19. The official cause of death is suicide by barbiturate overdose. But the evidence tells a different story. It tells the story of a woman who knew too much, who loved too recklessly, and who threatened to expose the most powerful men in America. It tells the story of a cover-up orchestrated at the highest levels of government, involving the LAPD, the FBI, and possibly the Justice Department itself. It tells the story of a file sealed for 60 years and then deliberately mutilated before release. It tells the story of 3 witnesses who saw the truth with their own eyes and were silenced, discredited, or ignored. And it tells the story of 22 missing pages that contain the one piece of evidence no one in power can allow to be seen: the name of the man who was with Marilyn Monroe when she died. The man who left Marilyn Monroe's house at 4 in the morning on August 5, 1962, was never charged. He was never questioned. His name was never officially released. The 22 pages that would have identified him are gone, but the truth doesn't disappear just because the paperwork does. Somewhere, in a locked file cabinet, or a secure digital archive, or a private collection, those pages still exist. Someone knows exactly what they say. Someone knows who that man was. Someone knows what he took from Marilyn's house. Someone knows what he said on that phone call Fred Otash overheard. And someone knows why the FBI has spent 60 years protecting his identity, and someone has decided that you're never going to find out. One last unresolved question remains. If the FBI's primary concern was truly protecting national security, why did they wait 60 years to release a file they knew would be incomplete? Why release it at all? The answer is both simple and terrifying. They released it because they had to, because federal law, specifically the Freedom of Information Act, required them to respond to the court order. But they removed the 22 most critical pages because no law could force them to admit that the Attorney General of the United States, the brother of the president, was the last person to see Marilyn Monroe alive. That truth is too dangerous. It was too dangerous in 1962, when it could have destroyed the Kennedy presidency and triggered a constitutional crisis. It's still too dangerous today, when it would shatter the carefully constructed mythology of Camelot and force Americans to confront the possibility that their government has been lying to them for 6 decades about the death of the most famous woman in the world. But the witnesses saw him. The phone records prove she called him. The timeline places him at the scene. The missing evidence confirms there was something to hide. And the 22 missing pages stand as a permanent admission of guilt, a black hole in the historical record that screams the truth louder than any document ever could. Marilyn Monroe didn't die alone. She died in the presence of the man who had everything to lose if she ever told the world what she knew. And 60 years later, the FBI is still protecting him, still hiding the evidence, still maintaining the lie. Because some secrets are too valuable to ever let go, and some men are too powerful to ever be held accountable, even in death.